Three myths about Atlantis and what we're not being told about the world's most important civilization. A century ago, the search for Atlantis was a real archaeological endeavor. The 1915 annual report to the Smithsonian Institute Board of Regents contained an extensive discussion by French researcher Pierre Termiere about the state of the efforts being made to locate it. Termiere was no New Age occultist either. He was a member of the Academy of Sciences, a director of the Geological Chart of France. Why is it now, 110 years later, that the search for Atlantis has been labeled de facto pseudoarchaeology by places such as Oxford Reference Dictionary? A greater example of begging the question fallacy could not be produced. Not only that, but a deliberate and systematic undertaking by certain corners of the archaeological community is aimed at convincing you that pondering the subject of a lost advanced Pleistocene age civilization makes you a white supremacist. But we know these histrionics and efforts to cancel certain voices are hallmarks of intellectual bankruptcy, who stand to lose a lot of credibility were it to be found they were completely wrong for so long. But is there more to it than just that? The Apocalypse of Yanavalkaya, published April 2023 by the Library of CERN, fearlessly explores that question, and in doing so has made a series of discoveries that will leave you awestruck. As it turns out, we've been lied to about Atlantis for very, very long, and here's just three mainstream fabrications about Atlantis that most people nowadays take for granted. Number one, Atlantis was an island in front of the Straits of Gibraltar. We've all heard this claim repeated ad nauseum for a very long time, but does it really agree with what Plato of ancient Greece says about that territory? Certainly, if we look only at certain parts of Plato's Timaeus and Critias, we might be led to that opinion. Our documents record how your city once halted an enormous force that was marching insolently against not just the whole of Europe, but Asia as well, from its base beyond Europe in the Atlantic Ocean. I should mention that in those days the ocean there was navigable, since there was an island in front of the strait, which I've heard you say your people call the Pillars of Hercules. The island was bigger than both Asia and Libya combined. This quote from Timaeus is what most people focus on, but this is not Plato's full account. We need to look a bit further, he said. And travelers in those days used to get to the further islands from where they had access to the whole mainland over on the other side, the mainland which surrounds the genuine sea. Everything this side of that strait is like a narrow-mouthed harbor, but that is the true sea, and the land which completely surrounds it truly deserves the name mainland. On this island of Atlantis, this great and remarkable dynasty had risen, which ruled the whole world. Many of the other islands and parts of the mainland too. They also governed some of the lands here inside the strait. Libya up to the border with Egypt, and Europe up to Etruria. The complete quote makes it obvious that the island in front of the strait is the island of Madeira, which is more than large enough to be a naval base as described by Plato. The other islands, quote unquote, are very possibly all of Micronesia, and the mainland here being the Maghreb region of Africa, as well as parts of southern Europe, from Spain to Italy. Altogether, we have a territory most certainly bigger than both Asia and Libya combined, as the ancient Greeks understood those continents. Why has there been such a focus on a mythical, massive island in the Atlantic rather than paying attention to the full context of the quote? Could it have to do with the fact that there is a structure in mainland Africa, Mauritania to be exact, that sits within the Atlantean territory Plato actually describes, and is shaped precisely the way Plato describes their capital city? Furthermore, this feature, dubbed the Richat structure, has been inhabited by humans for hundreds of thousands of years and had been destroyed by the ocean that once violently passed over it in what looks like a cataclysmic tidal wave. Myth 2. Plato is the only source of the story of Atlantis. Perhaps more explosive revelations the fact that Plato is not even the sole ancient author to have mentioned Atlantis by name. In the 1st century BC, Diodorus Siculus published his magnus opus, Bibliotheca Historica, a 20-volume history of the world that he compiled from other more ancient sources. Book 3 relays the work of an ancient Alexandrian scholar by the name of Dionysius Scytobrachion. The identity of this Dionysius is a bit of a mystery, as this name appears nowhere else in ancient literature. Some believe he is the same as Dionysius of Miletus, making the author at least a contemporary of, but probably older than Plato. However, Miletus is on the opposite side of the Mediterranean from Alexandria, and so it seems unlikely that Diodorus would have mixed the two up. It's here in Book 3 that we find an incredibly detailed and independent account of Atlantis, where Plato talks about the geography of their capital city and governmental structure. Diodorus discusses the founding family, internal squabbles leading to a perpetual civil war, religious rights, and other subjects Plato says nothing about. Not only have the manuscripts of Book 3 been in our possession for over 1,000 years, but more modern scholars such as Louis Spence pointed out to the world in his 1927 book, The History of Atlantis, that this account exists. Perhaps even more amazingly, the same translator of the 2008 Oxford University Press edition of Plato's Timaeus and Critias also translated large portions of Diodorus's work. Are we to believe that he somehow completely missed Diodorus's account of Atlantis, going on to repeat the same trope of Plato being the only surviving record? From Diodorus, we learn that the Atlanteans inhabited the westernmost regions of Libya by a great mountain that the Greeks called Mount Atlas that existed near the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. There is indeed an ultra-prominent mountain in southern Morocco they call Tub Kal. Incidentally, the earliest human remains ever discovered were in a cave a mere 125 kilometers away, meaning this mountain, the Richat structure, and surrounding regions have been known to humanity from the very beginning of our species. Myth number 3. The ancient river system of North Africa was recently discovered. In 2015, a team of researchers announced they discovered an ancient network of rivers that once existed under the sands of Mauritania, where one finds the Richat structure. These rivers would have given Atlanteans easy access to the ocean and involved a mega river the team named the Taman Rasset, with such an easy passage across Africa. The Atlanteans had everything they needed to become the maritime superpower described by Plato. And yet, curiously, a massive river system like this has been drawn on maps of Africa since the days of Ptolemy. For thousands of years, North Africa has been illustrated with a large river system spanning east to west, with the main river being called the Fluvius Niger, or Black River. It's an excellent candidate for the biblical river Pison, which ran the breadth of the land called Havilah, wherein one finds Eden at its western edge. Only in the last couple of centuries have maps of Africa excluded this river. Was it simply because sailors could no longer locate it, that it was removed from our history and memory? And what does this say about the connection some people have made between Atlantis and Eden? Revelations concerning the nature of humanity and the gods? All this and much, much more is explored in detail in the heavenly reference book, The Apocalypse of Yajnavalkya. Truly nothing in human history makes any sense absent an advanced Pleistocene age civilization. The contracts our ancient ancestors had with these advanced people laid the groundwork for the many religious and political structures that exist to this very day. It does appear that, far from being lost, the people known as the Atlanteans have, over a long period of time, been systematically excised from human history. Who erased this history and why is yet another topic explored that will leave you speechless. Prepare for a journey through humanity's collective mythologies and most advanced sciences, ultimately arriving at new understanding of life on Earth that will leave many of the foundations upon which your beliefs about our origins rest utterly shattered. And this is from House and Wise. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.